Hi folks, how's it going? Hope you're enjoying your Sunday afternoon. This is Mike, and I'd like to do, hope this is not too long of a video, but I'd like to show you the rest of my film books, okay? I showed you my horror film books a little while ago, and now I'd like to show you just basically about every other kind of film. But before I start, I did forget one of my horror film books, and I'll show that to you now. This is called Poverty Row Horrors, put out by the McFarland Company, which puts out a lot of good stuff like this. And this is basically just a list of films that were made at studios like Monogram, PRC, Republic during the 30s and 40s, starring people like Bela Lugosi and son Boris Karloff, and lots of fun. So I forgot that in my last video. Alright? Okay, well, I've talked about this before, but everybody knows that I have this fascination for old Hollywood, okay? The old days, studio system, star system, and all that. So I have a lot of books that reflect that interest. Starting off with this, A Pictorial History of the Silent Film, Silent Screen by Daniel Bloom. It's loaded with photographs, just photographs starting the earliest days of silent movies back in the 1890s, and all the actors who started out and became stars, and a lot of people who didn't make it to the talkies and all that, which brings us up to A New Pictorial History of the Talkies, also by Daniel Bloom, along with John Coble, another great book loaded with photographs. There's a lot of textual information as well, but mainly it's just photographs of stars and directors and stills from films. It's really a lot of fun, okay? And I also have this group of books about the Hollywood studios, okay? These came out, I think all these came out in the 70s or maybe the 80s. There was one, The Paramount Story, The MGM Story, The Universal Story. Okay, these are getting in my way here. I'm surrounded by books. I'm sitting in my dining room and I've got books piled up all around me on chairs, on the floor, on the table. Okay, The RKO Story, and The Warner Brothers Story. Okay, these are essential. I mean, these are really wonderful. They talk about the history of the studios, the men who started everything way back in the Nickelodeon days, and how the business built up and built up. And of course, most of these people started off in New York, and then they moved to Hollywood sometime in the 1920s and started filming there. And these books have information and reviews going decade by decade, year by year, talking about every film that was made by the studios and talking about the actors, and so it's got a lot of great photographs, loaded with information. Okay, all right. Oh, okay. And let's see. Reflecting my interest in old Hollywood also, here's a book I bought fairly recently. It's called Glamour in the Golden Age, Movie Stars of the 1930s. It's edited by Adrian L. McLean. It's just a series of articles and essays about the different performers back in that era, that decade, and giving kind of assessments on their careers and their their charisma, what made them stars. Here's another one I bought. Basically, I think I bought this at a flea market recently. 60 Years of Vamps and Camps, which is another one that's loaded with photographs. It's mainly just a photograph book of all the stars in the old days. You know, it's Flash Gordon on one side, and we have Betty Grable on the other. So it's just loaded. A lot of fun. Here's another one called Cinema. And again, it's just, this is more text, but it has a lot of photographs as well. Going back to the earliest days of silent films, talking about how things progressed at all the different studios. Here's a cool book called The Decline and Fall of the Love Goddesses, okay? Written by a guy named Patrick Agan, and basically he just talks about some of the glamour queens of the old days, and on up to people like Marilyn Monroe, Rita Hayworth, Betty Hutton, Susan Hayward, a lot of women that were just, you know, magic on screen, and how their careers kind of went into a peak and then started to decline. And it talks about some of their personal troubles that some cost them their careers, and some, of course, their lives. And this is a great book called They Had Faces Then. Okay, hope you can see these. By John Springer and Jack Hamilton. It's just basically A to Z, the stars, superstars and the not quite stars of the 1930s, and it just talks about all of them, and you know, again, lots and lots of photographs. Just great. Okay. Okay. And then I have these books about different decades. All right. So, the films of the 30s. More films of the 30s. The films of, are you ready? The 40s. And then on up to the 50s. And, yes, the 60s. Okay. And finally, the 70s. And I don't know if they have these for the 80s, 90s, and on up. I don't know if they do or not, but this is kind of where my interest, where it kind of begins and ends, I guess you might say. Okay. And I also have a series of books about the films of different performers, okay? Listing everything that they did in their career. And I start off with the films of Marilyn Monroe. Here are the films of Elvis Presley. I actually have all of Elvis's films, all of his theatrical films, and most of his concert films as well. Films of Gene Kelly. Here's a very old one, hardback book. Films of Judy Garland. Films and career of Judy Garland. And this is, I think a friend of mine ripped this off from a library or something. It had a little library card on it, but he gave it to me. Okay. Betty Davis, her films and career. The films of Shirley Temple. I know you all love Shirley Temple, right? And finally, the films of Greta Garbo. Okay. The Divine Garbo. All right. So, okay, I also have a book that came out fairly recently. It's by Janine Basinger. It's called The Star Machine. And this is a series of articles and essays about, again, different actors and actresses of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and how they went through the studio system and how they were, you know, sort of remade. Their appearance, their reputations, everything about them was kind of manufactured by the studios, and how it affected a lot of them in their personal lives, and a lot of them who decided they wanted to get out of that system. For example, great long article about Deanna Durbin. For those of you who remember her, she was a child star of the 1930s who went on to become a huge star in the late 30s and all through till the late 40s, and then she just walked away from it and never looked back. She was only in her late 20s at the time, and she just decided that she had enough of making the same movie over and over again, and she just wanted to have a private life. So that's what she did. Okay. Let's see. What else have I got here? Okay. I also have a series of books, well, small series of books. There's written about specific films, and they give a lot of background information and anecdotes and interviews by people who are involved in certain films. And one of them is this book about the film Imitation of Life, which was released in 1959, starred Lana Turner, John Gavin, and Sandra Dee, Susan Conner, and Juanita Moore. And it just talks about the making of the film, and you know, different stories about the people involved, the director, and the aftermath of the film. And here's one about the film All About Eve. It's called All About Eve, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Here's the one about The Night of the Hunter, which I talked about this in a review I did of that film, because I love it very much. And yeah, Heaven and Hell to Play With, the filming of The Night of the Hunter. And here's one for Rebel Without a Cause. It's called Live Fast, Die Young. Okay, which is really cool. And that was a very much a landmark film, and just a lot of very bizarre things that happened while the film was being made. And directed by Nicholas Ray, who was a very creative but a very troubled man. But okay, those are fun. All right, what else do I have? Okay, now then, if you want to talk about bad films, if you're a lover of bad films, this is one called The Worst Movies of All Time. Okay, and I also have the Golden Turkey Awards by Harry and Michael Medved. and there's a sequel to that, Son of Golden Turkey Awards. These are just great fun. And here's one by Harry Medved with Randy Dreyfuss called The 50 Worst Films of All Time. Alright? Those are cool. Let's see, what else do we have here? Here's a movie, or here's a book that came out fairly recently. It's called Cut: Hollywood Murders, Accidents, and Other Tragedies. So basically it's just a lot of gossip, information about people who unfortunately took their own lives and had very difficult times, went through scandals and all that sort of thing. So if that's your cup of tea. And let's see. What else have I got? Okay. Here's the book, The Academy Awards, Unofficial History. This goes up to, I believe, the year, oh boy, I'm not sure, 2009. Yeah, okay. So it just lists everybody who ever won the Academy Award, the people who came close, and the politics behind it. And I've talked about the Academy Awards before, and for me it's just good for trivia. I don't think it has anything to, I don't think you can vote on the best film of the year or the best actor. I think that's kind of ridiculous, but I do like to read the list of winners and all that. I think it's kind of fun. Here's something called the Encyclopedia of Hollywood Film Actors. Fun to have those. Here's something called The Wicked Women of the Screen, which talks about specific actresses like who played, you know, femme fatales and evil characters. Barbara Stanwyck and Bette Davis. Pola Negri, Theda Bara, Barbara Steele is in this. Anne Savage. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool book. Lots of information. Here's a book called Hollywood Kids, all about child actors, some of whom survived, some of whom did not. Great picture of Mickey and Judy on the cover. It's fairly recent. This is the official movie guide to The Lord of the Rings, which is a series of films I really fell in love with. Okay. Here's another kind of a gossipy book called Flesh and Fantasy by Penny Stallings, and it's just a lot of, again, it's all about the old days of the star system and how they kind of manufactured stars and they changed their appearances and all that, and yeah, loaded with photographs. Okay. Another guide to movie stars, the world's great movie stars. Okay, loaded with photographs and lots of information, lists of films, things like that. Got some books specifically about musicals. There's one called Gotta Sing, Gotta Dance. Hope that's not upside down. Don't laugh to the. Just talks about all the old Hollywood musicals. Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, right? The whole history of that. And here's another one called All Talking, All Singing, All Dancing: The History of Hollywood Musicals. And okay, here are a couple of books I bought at flea markets. One is just simply called The Movies. And that's what it's about, the movies. Okay. There's a larger book called The Great Hollywood Movies. Okay. Finally, let's see what we have here. Okay. Now, if you're more into cult movies, okay, here's a series of books by Danny Peary, Cult Movies, and then Volume 2. And Volume 3. All right, I got a lot of information about films back in the 80s by reading these, and I believe there's a Cult Movies 4, and if there is, I have it, and I have no idea where it is. I'm sure I have it, but it's not around. I think it's getting difficult to find anything in this house. Okay. Danny Peary also wrote this book called Cult Movie Stars. Okay. And this is cool. A guide for the film fanatic. Right? Lots of fun. And speaking of cult films, here's something called Video Hound's Complete Guide to Cult Flicks and Trash Picks. So, all the Ed Wood type movies and stuff like that. Also by Danny Peary, he wrote this marvelous book called Close-Ups, the Movie Star Book, which is a series of essays that he took out of books and newspapers about different classic stars, and yeah, it's just wonderful. Again, going all the way back to the silent days. Okay. For those of you who are interested in film noir, okay, here is the essential guide, Film Noir, an encyclopedic reference to the American style. And I think this was published sometime in the 1980s, and there was this basically, it's just like a list of what is considered to be film noir, and all through the decades, going all the way back when that style first began to show up in films. Of course, it was not really recognized until the French critics started noticing it in the late 1940s of certain kinds of American films. And I think there was a later edition of this, which I do not have. And also on that subject, Dark City Dames. This is a book about some of the famous actresses who appeared in film noir, like Jane Greer and Anne Savage, Audrey Totter, Colleen Gray, Evelyn Keyes, Marie Windsor, just a lot of really great actresses of that time who appeared in these films, and well, a lot of them were interviewed fairly recently. And here's one called The Dark Side of the Screen, Film Noir. And finally I have the Film Noir Reader number 4, and I have no idea why I never bought volumes 1, 2, and 3, but I did pick this one up, so okay. And here's a book called The Golden Age of B Movies, which introductions by Evelyn Ankers, Queen of the B films at Universal in the 1940s, and it picks out B films from all through the 1940s, and just gives reviews and analysis and talks about the people who are in it. It's a lot of fun. And also about B films, this is called Second Feature. The Best of the B Films by John Cocci. And again, this just talks about a lot of obscure things, horror films, science fiction, serials, westerns, all kinds of things from all the 30s and 40s and all that. It's really a lot of fun. Here's a book called Rock on Film, which does reviews and analysis of all the films that featured anything about rock and roll, so it includes beach party films and all the Elvis Presley films and all that stuff that came out in the 1950s. Really cool. And this is called the I Was a Teenage Juvenile Delinquent Rock and Roll Horror Beach Party Movie Book, with stunning Mamie Van Doren on the cover, playing her records. And a complete guide to the teen exploitation film from 1954 to 1969. And this is just great fun. If you like that era, if you came from that era like I did, it's got posters. Here we go, Running Wild with Mamie Van Doren, all kinds of cool information. Okay, what else have I got here? I've got a huge stack of movie star biographies and autobiographies, which I'm not going to show you all those, but I'll show you some of the good ones, some of those I really like and I'm proud of. This is Rainbow, Stormy Life of Judy Garland. Everything you ever wanted to know about Judy Garland. And here's a good one. Betty Davis, Larger Than Life. And the book's probably larger than my camera screen, but this is wonderful. If you're a Betty Davis freak, I mean, it's just got great photographs, articles about her films, reproductions of posters in color and black and white. Just a beautiful book. Here's another kind of an art book about Marilyn Monroe. Okay, loaded with photographs all through her career, where she started out in modeling, and all through her films up to the end of her life. And oh, here's a beautiful book. This is called Screen Deco, a celebration of the high style in Hollywood. It's all about the use of Art Deco sets and furniture and decorations in Hollywood films of the 1930s. And just got some beautiful photographs, all in black and white, of course, because all the films were. Yeah, this is wonderful. Really wonderful stuff. I love this book. Art Deco. Check this out, if you can see that. Okay. Here's a book called Fellini's Faces. It just shows photographs, studies of the faces of almost everybody who was ever in a Fellini film. All the men and women from all of his films. Yeah. Loaded with photographs. Great fun to have that. Okay, and also I have film posters of the 60s, okay, which is just what it says it is, and it's endless photographs of films from all over the world. This is a poster for Blow Up, okay, and also film posters of the 70s, right? On the back it's got De Niro and Taxi Driver. Hope you can see that. Yeah, these are cool. Okay, what haven't I shown you here? Let's see. Well, of course, you can't live without Leonard Maltin. If you're a film fan, I started buying these books I think the first one came out in 1969, and I bought it, and I swear to God, I read it from cover to cover. And that's probably about the time when I really got fascinated about the history of films, and because there were just films that he talked about that he listed in his book that I'd never heard of and never seen. A lot of them I've still never seen. And I bought almost every volume of this. He puts out one every year, and I believe I have the one for 2013. I have no idea where it is, and I have not bought its latest, but I'm sure I will. Okay, here's a book called The Monogram Checklist. For those of you who know about Monogram Studios, all the low-budget films they made, and it's basically just a list of all the films that they made in the history of that studio. So, yeah, if you like that kind of thing. Hollywood musicals, year by year. Again, just a list of great musicals. And here's something called, it's glasses, the B-List. Okay. The National Society of Film Critics on the low-budget beauties, genre-bending mavericks, and cult classics we love. Okay. So, a lot of information in that. Here's a book called, it's kind of torn up the dust jacket, those great movie ads. I've had this for a long time. It's just a series of the kind of ads you would see in the newspaper back in the old days, which they really don't have anymore, unfortunately, in most newspapers, except in large cities. But yeah, it's just kind of cool. Okay, let's see, what else do I have? I think I'm almost done here, and I hope. Okay, here is one of the biographies that I wanted to show you. This is called Vamp, The Rise and Fall of Theda Bara. Now, she was a fascinating actress. She was one of the first great movie stars. Started out in 1915, and she made something like 40 films between 1915 and 1919, and then she stopped making films and went on the stage, and she was just a huge star. Never made a sound film, and most of her films were lost. They were all lost in a fire, except for the very first film she starred in back in 1915, which is A Fool There Was, where she became the screen's first vamp, which is short for vampire. And also her very last film, she made a comeback film in 1925 that was not terribly successful, called The Unchastened Woman, and that also survives. And I think one or two of her others, and that's about it. But she's basically now she's basically just an image, you know, in books and on photographs, and because her film work is lost. Okay, this is a book about my favorite director and also one of my favorite actors, John Cassavetes. So yeah, very proud of that. Another one of my favorite biographies is about another favorite actor, Robert Mitchum. Baby, I Don't Care. Yeah, if you like Mitchum. And here's a great book called Lulu in Hollywood, written by Louise Brooks, who is another fascinating actress from the silent days, who became famous in the latter part of the silent era, very late 20s. She left Hollywood and went to Germany and made two now classic silent films. The first one is called Pandora's Box. The second one is called Diary of a Lost Girl. And those films were kind of not seen very much in this country and were not terribly successful in Europe at the time, so they were sort of lost until they began to be shown again in the 1950s, long after Louise Brooks had left Hollywood. When she came back to Hollywood in the late 1920s, she could not get work in films, and after making a low-budget western in 1938 with John Wayne, she left Hollywood for good and lived a life of obscurity until she was rediscovered in the 1950s. And then she became a writer and a film critic, and it's most of her writings and her talking about her own life are gathered in this book, and it's really wonderful. She lived until, I believe it was 1987 she died. She kind of regained her popularity and was a big, to a lot of people, but she was probably the greatest star of the silent days. I need some coffee here. Okay, well that's pretty much it. Unless you want to talk about the gossipy side of films, I have this great fun book called The Film Snob's Dictionary. Everything you need to know if you consider yourself to be a film snob, all the things you should know. Here's a book called Hispanic Hollywood, all about Spanish-speaking actors in films from the earliest days. And here's a book by Quentin Crisp, King of Gossip, or the Queen if you want to call him that, How to Go to the Movies. He just talks about all the classic actors and the movie stars and a lot of the films from the old days, and it's pretty funny stuff. Here's a book by David Del Valle, or do you call it David Del Valle? I'm not sure, but it's Lost Horizons Beneath the Hollywood Sign, where he talks about a lot of the people that he worked with when he was a Hollywood agent, and a lot of the bizarre characters he met when he was in Hollywood. And it's interesting. A lot of it's very sad. And of course, who could live without Hollywood Babylon, right? You know you all have it. And then its sequel, Hollywood Babylon 2. And its latter-day reincarnation, Hollywood Babylon, It's Back, Volume 1. And I did not buy Volume 2. Okay, and as far as, that's pretty much it. Except for I have a lot of books. Well, here's The Film Goer's Companion by Leslie Halliwell. I think there have been several editions of that. Some of my favorite film critics, Pauline Kael, 5001 Nights at the Movies. Okay. One of my favorite writers that I just discovered recently is David Thompson, an English film critic, and he did this book called Have You Seen?, which is just an entire page going in alphabetical order. Each page has kind of a concise review of the film, everything from foreign films, silent films, some of the things that are coming out today, and it's just, I really enjoy reading it, even though I don't always agree with what he has to say. And another book by him is called The New Biographical Dictionary of Film. Very good book. I have some books by Roger Ebert. Okay, this came out recently. Roger Ebert's movie yearbook for 2013. I also have this book that he wrote called A Kiss Is Still a Kiss. Roger Ebert at the movies, and yeah, I met him. He came back. He was from Champaign-Urbana, where I live, and he came back to one of the local department stores back in the 70s, I believe it was, and was signing this book, and he autographed it for me. I'm very happy to have that. Here's an older book called Roger Ebert's Moving Home Companion, and then, which I just dropped on the floor. Okay, and then finally, he did a series of Roger Ebert, The Great Movies, and I have 3 volumes of that. Okay, finally, number 3. Okay, and I think that's it. That's pretty much it. And I'm sorry this went on so long, but I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me some comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Okay, thank you for watching.